there was another detail of all this that came to mind. Um, I really think that um, passionate play that finds its passions, finds its place through play, um, is something that I've been trying to encourage in my designs. Or rather, since I enjoy playing that way, I have found that I'm trying to steer away from just having everybody aimed at everybody.
Right.
So that and I'm looking, I mean, I'm benefiting a little bit. Circle of Hands was written well after um, Sorcerer, Troll Babe, and then my more experimental games.
Right.
And I had never anticipated that I was going to go and grab a game design that was so thoroughly GM and player again. Um,
Right.
and not that I hated it, it's just that I felt I'd been there, and now I was branching into these more weird designs and trying to make their weirdness work instead of just be gimmicky and that kind of stuff. But here I was back at the with the screen, the metaphorical GM screen,
Right.
even though I roll openly. Um,
Yeah.
but that's the metaphorical one is there, and particularly situational and or rather backstory authority, right? Rock solid, back in my lab,
Right.
and saying, okay, well, this is where my interest takes me. I mean, my unconscious won't let me not design Circle of Hands, and so I'm fucked. I have to do it.
Right.
And then, of course, Champions Now comes along, and there I am again, right?
Right.
Hardcore GMing all the way. What is this about? And so I've really kind of gone back to this is let's use the strengths of the players not having backstory authority. Although there's more in Champions than it looks, by the way. Um, but let's go back to that. What makes it work? What makes it work is the room to breathe, the room
Yeah.
to say, whom do I care about? I'm going to talk to some people. I'm going to live here. I'm going to do stuff. Um, and I really was learning a lot of the lessons from Dogs in the Vineyard, which in many ways is heavily influenced by Trollbabe. Um,
Hmm.
but I noticed that in play, a lot of people were completely ignoring what I thought of as the thematic punch of the game, which, and also, as far as I can tell, is so evident in every mechanic and every sentence that I can't understand why people weren't doing it. But they played it like Call of Cthulhu. They showed up at the town,
Right.
they skulked, they confronted, they investigated, they drilled down to find the bad guy, and then they judged them, and they either shot them or they found a way or figured out who needed a hug, and they made that happen.
Right.
And they really went into problem solving mode. This is a can we solve the problem before somebody kills somebody? Can we solve the problem before another murder? Can we
Right.
solve the problem before this bad thing happens? And or things get worse or whatever. We're here to save the town. I like the idea that in many ways these naive kids are going to go in, find what they think is the problem, and cope with it well or badly, and they're complex human problems. I mean, I like
Right.
that. I like a lot of the developmental stuff in the game, and so when I was involved, I really tried to have my character interact with people, not to solve the town's problem, but because this kid benefited from interacting with all these people, or had consequences from doing so, good or bad. And I liked that. But the idea of like showing up and going into like Columbo mode and looking for the crime and all that, and I just it really struck me as procedural in the worst sense of the word.
Right. No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
And so it's really a thing for me to say, all right, you're playing. I mean, I even wrote it in my notes in Circle of Hands at one point. How is this possible? You're riding a bunch of badasses, a special weapons section, basically, a SWAT team,
Right.
an A team,
Right.
on their horses, riding to a place where there is trouble. Now, how are we going to keep this from being a procedural?
Yeah.
And so that's why you have all that language in there. You got a bunch of different components. Spread them out, spread them out, spread them out.
Right.
Take your time. Think about the fact that no, it's not on you as the player to determine success or failure for the venture in the long run. That's not on your shoulders as the player. What's on your shoulders is deciding what your militant activist is going to do and want.
Right.
And I've got all this text. Like I was just picking up the text. The text is chock full of saying it's all about the portraiture.
Yeah. No,
Just
I
chock
like
full.
that.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I found about any of the games that I played where you are like pointed at each other, where the game sets you up for that, where to me it felt, as you said, just as much as like, well, what weapon am I going to kill you with?
Right.
Can we just get to the point where, because at that point I realized like the choice I had, or like in the game was pretty small. It was almost as small as if I was playing in Bob's Scripted Railroad.
Right.
And it's like, Bob, what are we supposed to do? Or where's the clue? Can you just give me the clue?
You
Well,
see,
here's the clue.
this
Okay.
is what I found when people saw the relationship map material from Sorcerer.
Right.
They loved it. It was for this was in the Sorcerer's Soul. It came out in January of 2002,
Right.
or at least the book did.
Haven't read that part yet.
Yeah,
I'm getting to it. Yeah.
But people just lost their shit over it. They'd never. I mean, people have pointed to one or two places in role-playing games where that technique had come up before. Although in a lot of cases, it's just using people as rooms in a dungeon. I go to this person, then you meet that person. You might go to this person or that person, but they're all still basically encounters.
Right.
In either for clues or for fights. And the relationship map was completely different in that regard. The only other, I remember talking about this with Greg Stafford, and he said, the only place I really got to write that was the Haunted Ruins, which was his favorite supplement for RuneQuest. And and I read it, and it's like, yeah, this is it. This is exactly it. We've got this room to breathe. And it was the same thing. I even thought, that's what I did. I went and I thought about the Haunted Ruins when I wrote the Circle of Hands. I said, I want to do it like that. You go, you breathe, there's a complex community, all these things are going on. None of them are really, if you hadn't shown up, or things didn't go south in one fashion or another through bad luck, it could bump along like this for a long time with a few people being miserable. That could happen.
Right.
And so, opening it up like that was a big deal for me. Now, I think that people ran with that and said, awesome. And of course, what they did was they knotted it up tighter. There's tons of games now. And there was a bunch that sort of rose and died that were very heavily influenced by Sorcerer and Trollbabe. All of them had you write down some people and then you drew arrows at each other.
Right, yeah.
Even though it can go differently in terms of who kills who,
right, it's
the same. It's like watching Italian opera. Yeah, they're all different, but come on.
Right.
They're all the same. And so I got really bummed about that. And I started saying, look, relax. And everybody was big on, they couldn't believe that in Sorcerer's Soul, the sorcerers were not part of the relationship map. And they're like, why not? They have to be part of the relationship map.
Well, go figure it out, dude. Go play the game. That's what's.
I agree about that. There is a reason, but the idea for everybody started doing it. They like put down a big piece of paper or the character sheet, was a piece of paper, and you started, relationship and mapping everything. And I noticed that in my source word diagrams that I've been doing in the games I've played in the last couple of years, I've been emphasizing, you got a lot of things on your 4-part diagram, and they aren't all connected. Some of them pull towards each other through coincidental means, which means they're going to be in the same place or regarding the same object. Some of them are connected through kinship and whatnot, but a lot of them aren't. And that's all right. Which ones get drawn together into the center through the principles that I have in the book, and those are where you start. Doesn't mean you can't go off and see your dad. It's just that you're not going to be framed into a scene with him by the GM. The only way you're going to see your dad is if you go. So I don't know. I really have been trying to get people to focus more on play and less about this setup that takes over from play.
Right. No, I got what you're saying now.
So that was really the only thing that was driving a lot of this. If you're, feeling good with that principle, then, feel free to have, like you said, have person in component 1 have an opinion about person in component 2 and be happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of inevitable,